It's June 1838, Westminster Abbey. The new queen is 18 and about to be crowned in front of the entire establishment. The ceremony drags on for hours. The dean forgets his cues. The archbishop forces the coronation ring onto the wrong finger. It takes Victoria an hour to pull it off afterward. Not exactly the brightest start to a reign. On top of that, Victoria wasn't intimidated by size. She was only about 150 centimeters tall. But this tiny young woman would end up defining an entire era. She had opinions, energy, and, importantly, her own mind. That became even more obvious when a certain German prince arrived. His name was Albert. Technically, he was her first cousin. But who cared about family ties in the 1800s? The marriage was arranged, sure, but Albert would soon become her biggest obsession. Victoria adored him, to the point where she proposed to him, not the other way around. They married in 1840. Albert wasn't just a handsome decoration. Okay, maybe for Victoria he was. But outside of that, he was clever and very aware that the monarchy needed a makeover. So he modernized it. He used photography to create a public image of a moral, respectable royal family. Think of it as early PR. But hey, this isn't Albert's story. Victoria enjoyed her husband. What she didn't enjoy was becoming a mother. Victoria had 9 children in just 17 years, which means she spent most of her marriage either pregnant, recovering from pregnancy, or preparing for the next one. And the funny part? She absolutely hated being pregnant. She once described the feeling as like a cow, which tells you everything you need to know about her level of enthusiasm. And while Victoria was busy trying to figure out how to avoid more babies, Albert was busy turning their growing brood into a political project. He took charge of their education, their discipline, and their public image. Victoria, meanwhile, was not the sentimental mother people assume. She didn't like babies. She thought they were ugly and frog-like, which is honestly a bold take considering they were her own. And breastfeeding? Absolutely not. She found the entire concept disgusting, so wet nurses handled that part. And yes, modern historians suspect she suffered from postpartum depression, which actually makes her reactions make a lot more sense. And speaking of many children, inside Victoria's growing family tree was a genetic mutation that no one could see, but everyone would eventually feel. Hemophilia. In simple terms, a disorder where blood doesn't clot properly. A small cut becomes a medical crisis. A bruise can turn deadly. Victoria herself didn't have the disease, but she was almost certainly the source of the mutation. We know today that hemophilia travels through the X chromosome. That means daughters can quietly carry it, while sons actually suffer from it. So as Victoria's daughters married into Europe's royal families, they took the mutation with them. And from there, the condition quietly traveled across Europe through dynastic marriages, Spain, Germany, and most famously, Russia. That's where things get interesting. The heir to the Russian throne, Alexei Romanov, Victoria's great-grandson, was born with hemophilia. The boy bled constantly, and the Romanovs were desperate. Enter Rasputin, the strange Siberian mystic who claimed he could heal him. Rasputin's influence over the imperial family became enormous, and the public hated it. Trust in the monarchy collapsed, and when World War I made everything worse, Russia imploded into revolution. Victoria never knew any of this, of course. What Victoria also didn't know was that her beloved husband wouldn't live to see his 43rd birthday. In 1861, Albert died after a short illness, and Victoria's world collapsed overnight. She disappeared from public life, dismissed court ceremonies, and refused to wear anything but black for the next 40 years. At first, the public was sympathetic. Losing a spouse at that age is brutal. But sympathy doesn't last forever, especially in politics. As the years dragged on, people began asking, Why are we paying for a queen who refuses to show up? Republican sentiment started growing fast. Newspapers called her selfish and useless. Some even argued that maybe Britain didn't need a monarchy anymore. And for the first time, that idea didn't sound crazy. To save the monarchy, Victoria had to climb out of her own depression. And she did. She started appearing at public events, supporting charities, and letting the public see the royal family as a normal family. It worked. People warmed up to her again. The Republican talk faded. The monarchy was stable again. By the late 1800s, Britain controlled a massive empire. The biggest piece of it was India. Technically, India had hundreds of local rulers, but the real power sat in London. And in 1877, Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli convinced Parliament to give Victoria a new title, Empress of India. And Victoria loved it. She never visited India, but she liked the idea of ruling it. However, being Empress came with a problem. She knew a lot about India on paper, but almost nothing about the actual people who lived there. Except here, something unexpected happened. During her Golden Jubilee in 1887, Victoria received several Indian attendants as part of the celebrations. One of them was Abdul Karim, a 24-year-old clerk from Agra. His job was simple: serve the Queen, carry letters, maybe translate a few things, nothing special. But Victoria became fascinated with him. He cooked Indian dishes for her, introduced her to curry, and taught her basic Urdu phrases. Soon, she wanted real lessons. So Karim went from servant to munshi, which means teacher. That alone would have been strange enough. She called him my good friend and wrote to him constantly. Now imagine the reaction at court. A British empress being tutored by a young Indian Muslim servant? Aristocrats panicked immediately. Some accused Karim of influencing the queen. Others said it was embarrassing for the empire. And when Karim started receiving honors, land in India, and private access to the queen, things went from strange to scandal. Historians have never confirmed that Victoria and Karim were romantically involved. What we do know is that their relationship was unusually close for a queen and a servant. And when Victoria died, King Edward VII personally ordered that hundreds of letters between Victoria and Karim be burned. Which is pretty suspicious, isn't it? By 1901, Victoria was old, frail, and at the end of one of the longest reigns in European history. She had outlived her husband and most of her ministers. When she finally died, she didn't want to be buried in black. She insisted on white. And in her coffin, she asked for Albert's dressing gown, a cast of his hand, and a lock of hair from John Brown, the Scottish servant she had adored after Albert's death. Even at the end, Victoria wasn't simple. She had ruled for 63 years. When she became queen, Britain was a constitutional monarchy unsure of its place in a changing world. When she died, it was the center of the largest empire on Earth, ruling roughly a quarter of the globe and nearly 400 million people. Not bad for someone who hated pregnancy.